If nothing changes, nothing will change. And if you carry the same habits, the same mindset, and the same wounds into 2026, you will get the same life. Transformation does not begin with comfort. It begins with destruction. Not the destruction of your body, but the destruction of the version of you that is lazy with prayer, addicted to distraction, afraid of discipline, and attached to the dunya more than to Allah. This is the moment to let the old you die so the new you can finally live. The old you cannot enter the new year. The calendar does not transform a person, intention does. A new year arriving without inner change is only a continuation of the past. Islam teaches us that growth is not marked by dates, but by decisions. If the same habits, the same excuses, and the same neglect of the soul remain, then the new year will carry the same burdens. The old version of you is familiar, but familiarity does not mean alignment with Allah. Many people cling to who they were because change feels uncomfortable, but faith demands movement. A heart that remains stagnant cannot step into a future Allah is preparing. The believer must be honest with themselves. Which patterns are no longer serving your iman? Which habits weaken your discipline? Which distractions steal your time with Allah? These are not questions of judgment, but of preparation. You cannot walk into a new season with the same mindset that kept you trapped in the old one. Islam does not teach comfort-based growth. It teaches conscious effort, self-accountability, and renewal of intention. The old you carries fear. The new you must carry trust. The old you delays obedience. The new you responds to it. This shift is not symbolic. It is lived through daily choices. Allah calls the believer to continuous renewal, not once, not when convenient, but whenever the heart drifts. Entering a new year is an opportunity to return, to realign, and to rise. The old you was shaped by excuses. The new you must be shaped by commitment. Without commitment, time passes, but the soul remains unchanged. Transformation begins when you stop negotiating with your weaknesses, when you choose discipline over distraction, when you choose prayer over procrastination. The old you may be comfortable with delay. The new you understands that delay is the enemy of destiny. Every postponed act of obedience costs the heart clarity and strength. Change is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming who Allah created you to be before fear, habit, and distraction interfered. The old you learned survival. The new you must learn submission. Submission to Allah's guidance brings order to life and stability to the soul. If you want a different year, you must become a different person, not in identity, but in intention, action, and direction. The believer does not wait for circumstances to change before they act. They act in obedience, and Allah changes the circumstances. The old you is built on comfort. The new you must be built on discipline. Comfort keeps you where you are. Discipline takes you where Allah is calling you. Growth feels heavy before it feels freeing. The heart resists what the soul needs, but Allah rewards the one who moves forward despite resistance. You cannot keep what is breaking you and expect Allah to rebuild you. Something must be released for something greater to enter. The old you will argue for delay. The new you will answer with action. Every step away from who you were is a step toward who you are meant to become. This year does not require a new environment, it requires a new heart. And the heart that chooses Allah over habit will never walk the same path again. The old version of you is built on what you tolerated. The new version of you must be built on what you choose. Growth begins the moment you stop allowing what drains your faith, your time, and your focus. Allah never asked you to carry what is destroying you. He asked you to rise above it. The old you was shaped by environments that did not nurture your soul. The new you must be shaped by choices that protect your iman. You cannot heal in the same space that made you sick, and you cannot grow in the same patterns that weakened you. The believer who enters a new year without inner reform will find themselves walking the same emotional roads, fighting the same internal battles, and repeating the same regrets. Change is not something that happens to you. It is something you commit to. The old you negotiates with temptation. The new you closes the door. The old you flirts with delay. The new you moves with certainty. This is the difference between surviving and transforming. Your soul was not created for repetition of failure. It was created for elevation through obedience. When Allah opens your eyes to your weaknesses, it is not to shame you, it is to prepare you. The old you was distracted by what people thought. The new you must be anchored in what Allah knows. Approval from creation fades. Contentment with Allah remains. Growth begins when excuses end. Every transformation story begins with the same sentence: I can no longer live this way. The old you was familiar with comfort zones. The new you must be comfortable with discomfort for the sake of growth. Every sincere change feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. Your heart cannot expand while clinging to what limits it. The believer learns to release what no longer serves their akhirah. The old you feared failure. The new you fears disobedience. This shift changes everything. Transformation is not loud. It happens quietly in the choices no one sees, the prayers you guard, the habits you abandon, the discipline you build. The believer who reforms their private life will see Allah reform their public life. The old you waited for motivation. The new you walks with discipline. Motivation fades. Discipline builds destiny. Allah never withholds growth from the sincere servant. He withholds it from the one who refuses to change. The heart cannot receive new blessings while it is attached to old chains. Every time you choose obedience over ease, Allah strengthens your soul. The old you was busy chasing comfort. The new you must chase closeness to Allah. Your future requires a version of you that your past cannot produce. The believer who refuses to change will remain stuck in the same season even if years pass. The new year is not a door you walk through. It is a mirror that shows you who you choose to become. And the one who chooses Allah always enters the next season transformed. Allah will not change you until you change you. Allah's promise is clear and it is repeated in the Quran, so the believer does not misunderstand it. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. This is not harshness, it is dignity. Allah honors you by giving you responsibility over your own growth, your choices, and your direction. Many people wait for Allah to change their life while refusing to change their habits. They ask for ease while holding on to disobedience. They ask for clarity while living in distraction. But Allah's help comes when effort begins. Duha opens the door, but action walks you through it. Change does not start outside of you. It starts in the heart. When the heart decides it no longer wants to live far from Allah, the limbs follow. But without that internal decision, nothing truly shifts, only the scenery changes. Allah will not remove a habit you protect. He will not heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge. And He will not transform a heart that is comfortable remaining unchanged. Growth requires honesty before it requires strength. Many believers confuse patience with passivity. They say, I am waiting on Allah, but they are not moving toward Him. True patience is active. It is effort guided by trust, not silence wrapped in excuses. When Allah delays change in your life, it is often because He is waiting for you to move first, not because He needs your effort, but because you need the growth that effort produces. The believer who changes their inner world begins to see their outer world respond. Discipline brings structure. Repentance brings light. Consistency brings barakah. These are not coincidences. They are divine laws. Allah does not demand perfection before He helps you. He demands sincerity. A sincere attempt carries more weight than flawless intention with no action. You cannot ask Allah to change your future while clinging to a past. He is asking you to leave. Transformation requires release. Something must be sacrificed for something greater to enter. Change begins when excuses end, when the believer stops blaming circumstances, people, or timing and starts taking responsibility for their choices. Allah responds to movement. Even a small step toward Him is met with mercy, but standing still while hoping for change only deepens frustration. Many people want a new life without becoming a new person. Islam does not work that way. The soul must mature before the blessing arrives, or the blessing becomes a burden. When you change what is within you, your discipline, your priorities, your attachment to the dunya, Allah changes what surrounds you in ways you never planned. This change is not overnight. It is built through daily decisions, guarding one prayer, leaving one sin, choosing one act of obedience consistently. Allah loves gradual, sincere change. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that the most beloved deeds are those done consistently, even if small. Do not underestimate the power of one honest decision made for Allah. That single decision can redirect an entire life. Change requires courage. It means facing habits you avoided, wounds you ignored, and truths you delayed. But Allah stands with the one who chooses growth. You will not recognize yourself when you begin changing sincerely. Your patience will deepen, your clarity will sharpen, your heart will feel lighter. Allah does not change you to punish you. He changes you to elevate you. The moment you decide to change for His sake, the process begins, even if the results are not immediate. Because when you change what is within you, Allah takes care of what is beyond you. Change also requires letting go of the version of yourself that benefited from staying the same. Comfort can feel safer than growth, but safety without direction leads nowhere. Allah calls the believer to movement, even when the path feels uncertain. Every time you choose effort over ease, you strengthen your relationship with Allah. You show Him that you trust His promise more than your fears. That trust invites His help in ways you cannot imagine. Many people wait for confidence before they act, but action is what builds confidence. When you move toward Allah, your heart becomes braver, your mind clearer, and your soul steadier. The believer who commits to change begins to experience a new kind of peace. Not the peace of having everything resolved, but the peace of knowing you are walking in the right direction. Change will expose parts of you that resisted discipline. Do not run from this discomfort. This is the self being reshaped. Allah does not rush the transformation of a sincere servant. He allows it to unfold so the heart can truly absorb the lesson and the soul can become stable in its growth. Sometimes the change you seek will cost you relationships, habits, and identities that no longer align with your faith. This loss is not punishment, it is purification. The believer who embraces this process begins to feel lighter, even while carrying responsibility, because now the weight is meaningful. Do not be surprised if your environment resists your growth. Change in you will disturb what benefited from your old patterns. Every sincere change produces resistance before it produces relief. But the relief that follows is deep, lasting, and anchored in Allah. You may stumble while changing. That is not failure, it is learning. Allah values persistence more than perfection. Each time you return to Him after falling, your heart grows stronger and your resolve deepens. Change also teaches you humility. You realize how much you need Allah at every step, in every decision. The believer who changes for Allah stops chasing the world for validation. Their worth becomes rooted in obedience, not opinion. Your prayers begin to carry more presence. Your worship becomes more alive. Your heart becomes more attentive. This is how Allah rebuilds a person, quietly, steadily, faithfully. The old life begins to loosen its grip. New habits take root. New clarity emerges. Change does not remove every hardship, but it changes how you carry it, with faith, with strength, with trust. When you look back, you will not recognize the person you were before you chose this path, and you will thank Allah for every moment He waited for you to begin. Kill the habits that are killing your future. Some habits feel small, but their consequences are not. A delayed prayer, a neglected Quran, endless distraction, careless speech, these are not neutral behaviors. They shape the direction of your life. If the believer does not confront these patterns early, they quietly steal years that can never be returned. Many people pray for a better future while protecting the very habits that destroy it. They ask Allah for change, but refuse to leave the routines that weaken their iman, drain their time, and cloud their purpose. This is not a lack of dua, it is a lack of courage. Habits are the architecture of destiny. What you repeat becomes who you are, and who you are today is building where you will stand tomorrow. The believer must be brave enough to name what is harming them, not with shame, but with honesty. Denial delays healing, awareness begins transformation. Some habits are comfortable, but comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort can coexist with spiritual decline. Peace only comes when the soul is aligned with Allah. If a habit pulls you away from prayer, weakens your discipline, and steals your focus, it is not harmless, it is dangerous. Allah does not ask you to abandon everything at once. He asks you to begin one habit, one decision, one sincere step. Killing destructive habits requires replacing them with life-giving ones. You cannot simply remove, you must rebuild. The believer who abandons a harmful habit for Allah will find Allah replacing it with something better. This is a promise of divine exchange. Habits that harm your future often disguise themselves as normal life. But what is normal is not always what is righteous. Every habit carries a message about your priorities. Where your time goes, your heart follows. Do not underestimate the power of small daily obedience. A guarded fajr, a protected tongue, consistent remembrance, these quietly rebuild the future. The nafs resists change because it fears discipline, but the soul longs for it. Habits that once felt impossible to leave become light when your intention becomes clear. Transformation does not happen when life becomes easier. It happens when the believer becomes stronger. The Prophet ﷺ taught that the most beloved deeds to Allah are consistent, even if small. This is how habits are reshaped. Every time you resist a harmful pattern, you strengthen your future self. Your future is not built by what you hope for, but by what you practice. Some doors in life remain closed, not because Allah refuses to open them, but because certain habits refuse to leave. When the believer removes what is killing their growth, Allah releases what was waiting behind it. The person you are becoming is watching the decisions you make today, and the one who chooses discipline now will thank Allah later. Discipline is the price of transformation. Discipline is not punishment, it is protection. Allah does not ask you to restrain yourself to make life smaller, but to make your soul stronger. Without discipline, intentions remain dreams, and dreams remain wishes. Transformation begins the moment a believer decides that obedience is no longer optional, but essential. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who Allah is shaping you to become. Every prayer you guard, every temptation you resist, every distraction you abandon becomes a brick in that bridge. This is not visible to people, but it is recorded with Allah. Many seek change through emotion, but real transformation is built through structure. Emotion fades, discipline remains. When the heart feels weak, discipline carries the soul forward until faith regains its strength. A believer without discipline will constantly restart their journey. They will move forward and fall back, gain clarity, and then lose it, feel close to Allah, and then drift again. Discipline creates continuity. It keeps you moving even when your heart feels tired. Discipline teaches the soul to submit before it feels ready. It trains the nafs to obey before it feels comfortable. This is the secret of spiritual maturity, choosing what is right over what is easy. When you wake for Fajr on days your body begs you to sleep, that is discipline. When you lower your gaze, though your heart desires more, that is discipline. When you hold your tongue, though you want to respond, that is discipline. These moments quietly rebuild your character. Transformation is not built in public. It is built in private decisions that no one sees. Allah witnesses those moments, and He shapes the believer through them. Discipline does not remove hardship from life, but it gives you the strength to carry hardship without breaking. It replaces chaos with order, confusion with clarity, and weakness with resilience. A disciplined believer does not wait for the perfect mood to worship Allah. They worship because Allah is worthy, not because it feels convenient. The nafs hates discipline at first, but once it tastes the peace that comes from consistency, it begins to crave it. What once felt heavy becomes a source of calm. Discipline is how Allah trains His servants for what they prayed for. The blessing you seek requires a version of you that only discipline can produce. The believer who accepts discipline begins to experience a new type of freedom. Freedom from regret, from self-sabotage, from constant inner conflict. Without discipline, motivation becomes unreliable. With discipline, growth becomes inevitable. Every act of discipline strengthens your spiritual muscles. The more you practice it, the easier obedience becomes. Discipline does not make you rigid. It makes you reliable in your worship, your character, your promises, and your relationship with Allah. When life becomes difficult, disciplined believers do not collapse. They adjust and continue. Discipline transforms chaos into direction and effort into elevation. Allah loves the servant who strives against their own weakness more than the one who never faced struggle at all. Transformation costs comfort. Discipline pays the price. And when Allah sees that you are willing to carry that cost for His sake, He carries you where you never thought you could reach. Pain is the doorway to growth. Pain is not the end of the road for the believer. It is the entrance. Allah does not wound the heart without purpose, and He does not allow hardship to settle without wisdom. Pain is the language through which Allah reshapes the soul when comfort has done all it can. Many people think growth happens in moments of happiness, but real growth is born in difficulty. Ease reveals your gratitude. Pain reveals your strength, and Allah refines His servants through both. Pain awakens parts of the heart that comfort never touches. It strips away illusion, humbles the ego, and clarifies intention. In pain, the believer learns what truly matters. Every trial is a teacher. Every hardship carries a lesson, and every tear becomes a seed for future strength. Allah allows pain not to weaken you, but to wake you. When the heart grows too attached to this world, pain becomes the door that leads it back to Him. The believer who embraces pain with faith emerges with wisdom that cannot be taught by words alone. Pain slows you down so you can see what you are ignoring. It forces reflection. It invites repentance. It strengthens reliance on Allah. Growth begins when the believer stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "What is Allah teaching me?" Pain removes the masks people wear. It reveals sincerity. It exposes hypocrisy. It uncovers your own weaknesses and your hidden strengths. The believer who walks through pain with patience does not emerge broken. They emerge anchored. Every hardship carries hidden mercy. Even when the heart cannot see it, Allah is arranging something greater. Pain refines your priorities. What once seemed important becomes small. What once seemed distant becomes essential. The believer learns to pray differently in pain, with presence, with honesty, with surrender. Pain teaches you to stop depending on what cannot save you. It guides you toward the only one who can. Growth is never comfortable, but it is always worth it. The heart that survives pain becomes stronger, steadier, and more resilient. Allah does not waste pain. He uses it to prepare the believer for what they once prayed for. Pain builds endurance. Endurance builds character, and character builds destiny. Through pain, Allah empties the heart of attachment and fills it with faith. The believer who accepts pain as part of the journey walks with clarity, not bitterness. Every wound Allah allows carries healing within it. Growth does not erase pain, it transforms it. The servant who rises after hardship becomes a source of light for others. Pain humbles the soul. Humility attracts divine closeness. The believer who emerges from pain understands life differently. They speak differently. They love differently. Growth requires the courage to walk through pain rather than run from it. Pain strengthens your connection to Allah more than ease ever could. Allah uses pain to align the heart with its true purpose. When you pass through pain with faith, Allah lifts you higher than you were before. The believer who trusts Allah during pain will witness transformation they never imagined. Pain is temporary. Growth is permanent. Every trial leaves behind a stronger version of you. The servant who walks through pain with Allah walks out with peace. What breaks you without faith builds you with it. Pain is not the enemy of growth, it is the doorway. And the believer who steps through it becomes who Allah always intended them to be. Rebuild your life around Allah. Rebuilding your life around Allah is not about adding more religious routines to an already crowded schedule. It is about recentering everything, your goals, your priorities, your choices, your identity around the one who created you. When Allah becomes the axis of your life, everything else begins to align. Many people structure their life around work, relationships, or comfort, and then try to fit Allah into the spaces left behind. The believer does the opposite. They place Allah at the center and allow everything else to revolve around Him. When your life is built around Allah, your decisions become clearer, your boundaries become stronger, your heart becomes steadier. You stop chasing what drains you and start protecting what strengthens you. Rebuilding is not easy because it requires dismantling what no longer serves your soul. Old habits must be released. Old attachments must be examined. Old priorities must be restructured. The believer who rebuilds around Allah begins with prayer, not rushed prayer, not distracted prayer, prayer that anchors the day and orders the heart. When Salah becomes the foundation of your life, your time becomes organized by purpose rather than pressure. Rebuilding around Allah changes how you measure success. Success is no longer how much you have, but how close you are to Him. The heart that rebuilds itself around Allah learns to live with intention instead of impulse. You begin choosing actions based on akhirah, not ego. Your relationships shift. You stop chasing those who pull you away from Allah and grow closer to those who draw you nearer to Him. Rebuilding your life requires honesty. You must admit what has been broken. You must confront what has been neglected. You must accept responsibility for your own growth. Allah does not demand perfection before you rebuild. He demands sincerity. Every time you choose obedience over comfort, another piece of your life falls into place. The believer who rebuilds around Allah learns to let go of constant comparison. Your journey becomes between you and Him alone. When your heart is anchored in Allah, disappointment no longer destroys you. You bend, but you do not break. Rebuilding around Allah restores inner peace. The chaos quiets, the anxiety softens, the soul feels at home. You begin to see the dunya clearly useful, but not ultimate. The believer who rebuilds their life around Allah no longer fears loss because what truly matters cannot be taken. Your priorities shift from accumulation to purification. Your habits shift from distraction to devotion. Your goals shift from status to service. Rebuilding around Allah transforms hardship into hope and trials into testimony. You become less reactive and more reflective. Your speech becomes calmer, your heart becomes gentler. You stop living in survival mode and start living in submission. Rebuilding does not remove every struggle, but it gives every struggle meaning. The believer who rebuilds around Allah walks with quiet strength, not fragile confidence. When Allah becomes the foundation, your life becomes unshakable. Storms still come, but your structure holds. Rebuilding is the bravest thing a believer can do, choosing faith over familiarity. And when you finally stand on that new foundation, you will realize the old life could never have supported the future Allah had written for you. Rebuild with patience. Rebuild with trust. Rebuild with Allah. Because when Allah is your center, your life finally becomes whole. 2026 is waiting for a stronger you. 2026 is not waiting for your excuses. It is waiting for your effort, your growth, your courage, and your return to Allah. Time does not pause while the heart hesitates. The future is shaped by the believer who decides today that they will no longer remain who they used to be. A stronger you is not built by wishing for an easier life, but by choosing a deeper one. Allah prepares the next season by refining the soul in this one. If you want a new chapter, you must become a new person within it. 2026 is waiting for the believer who rises for Fajr, even when tired, who guards their heart when tempted, who chooses discipline when comfort whispers. These small acts are forging the strength your future requires. Strength is not loud, it is steady. It is the quiet consistency of a servant who keeps returning to Allah no matter how many times they fall. That is the strength that carries a person into a new year transformed. The coming year does not need the old habits that weakened you. It needs a heart that is awake, a mind that is focused, and a soul that is anchored in Allah. A stronger you does not complain about the process. They commit to it. They understand that growth is uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. 2026 is waiting for the believer who no longer runs from their weaknesses, but confronts them with dura, discipline, and action. Strength is built when you choose what is right, even when it is difficult. When you leave what harms you, even when it feels familiar. When you walk toward Allah, even when the path is steep. The stronger you is not someone else. It is the version of you Allah has always been calling you to become. 2026 is waiting for your healed heart, your guarded faith, your disciplined routine, and your clear priorities. A stronger you does not chase people. They chase closeness to Allah, and in that pursuit, everything else falls into its proper place. Strength grows in the unseen moments, the prayers no one hears, the struggles no one sees, the choices no one applauds. 2026 is waiting for the believer who has learned from pain, risen from trials, and refused to stay broken. A stronger you carries patience where you once carried fear, trust where you once carried doubt, calm where you once carried anxiety. Strength is the fruit of obedience repeated daily. 2026 is waiting for your transformation, not your perfection. A stronger you has learned that falling is not failure, staying down is. The believer who stands up again and again becomes unstoppable by the mercy of Allah. Strength is not about control. It is about surrender, surrendering your life to Allah's wisdom. 2026 is waiting for the servant who finally trusts Allah more than their own doubts. A stronger you no longer delays repentance, prayer, or change. They act because tomorrow is not promised. They build today because destiny is being written now. 2026 is waiting for your renewed intention, your purified heart, your disciplined routine, your sincere return to Allah. As stronger you walks into the new year, not afraid of the future because their faith is firm. They know Allah is with them. They know growth is happening. They know their past no longer defines them. 2026 is waiting for the believer who has outgrown excuses and embraced purpose, who has left comfort for clarity, who has chosen Allah over distraction. And when that stronger you arrives, the life Allah has prepared will finally be ready to meet them. 2026 does not need the broken, distracted, exhausted version of you. It needs the believer who wakes up for Fajr, guards their heart, controls their nafs, and moves with purpose. The old you had excuses. The new you has commitment. The old you chased comfort. The new you chases Jannah. Destroy what is weak. rebuild what is righteous, and walk into 2026 with a heart that is no longer afraid of change because it is anchored in Allah.